This is Goals with Soul, the podcast for visionary coaches and entrepreneurs, building your business with inspired action. In alignment with your mission and authentic message, so you can create impact for your soul clients and feel lit up every day. I'm your host, Jo Ingram, married mum of 3 daughters from London and a former ad agency director turned business coach and strategist. In Goals with Soul, we blend revenue generation with energetics, marketing strategies with pranic healing, and ambitious business goals with our soul's desires. If you're looking to build your business with less efforting and more ease, this is the podcast for you. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Goals with Soul. I'm Joanna Ingram, and here we are in April, which blows my mind. Every year I say that this year's gone quicker than the last, and it's happened again. Here in London, we've had a beautiful sunshiny week and the clock's changed on Sunday, and there's a feeling of such optimism. Everyone is smiling, and I've been out walking around my local woods, having a look at the bluebells, which are coming through a little bit early this year, and just feeling like I don't have to rush, I don't have to force things. I can just soften into what is simply coming and just allow. And seeing this in so many of the women that I work with, it's just been a really energetic winter. A lot of holding space, holding others, and let's be honest, holding it together. And spring's kind of here to remind us that we don't need to force our next breakthrough. We just need to receive it. Which just leads so beautifully into today's episode, because if you've ever felt like you're doing too much for your clients or your business feels heavy or entangled, this conversation is for you. I'm joined by the marvelous Michaela Pay, who you're just going to love instantly. She's a spiritual mentor, international keynote speaker, and best-selling author of Dismantling the Drama Triangle. She calls herself the Success Psychic. And what I love even more is that Michaela's vibe is no fluff, no faff, totally grounded. She calls herself the least spiritual person you'll ever meet. And here's the thing as well, Michaela's really been through it. And I seem to have a knack for attracting people, both connections, clients and friends, who have had some serious life experiences, right? I know if you've been listening to Goals with Soul for a while or know me personally, I'm sure you know my story, which I'm not going to leap into now, but so much drama in personal life that it sort of becomes a bit what you can attract if you don't manage that more carefully. And Michaela's story is one from navigating poverty to a 6-figure business to the unimaginable heartbreak of losing her husband in her 30s. And she's come back to her business with more clarity, strength and purpose than ever. And she brings that depth into everything she shares. In our chat, we go deep into the drama triangle, and that's a concept that explains how we unconsciously show up as the victim, the villain, or the hero in our business. Yep, even when we think we're being helpful. And it's so confronting in the best kind of way. I found myself nodding so many times, especially when we talked about the hero role. That energy of, let me swoop in and fix this for you, that so many of us slip into when we want our clients to succeed so badly. You know, it feels loving, but often it's disempowering, not just for them, also for us. Michaela's going to show us how to spot when we're in these patterns, and more importantly, how to shift out of them so we can attract what we really want without sacrificing ourselves in the process. So honestly, if you've been feeling a little bit like your business is taking more from you than it's been giving back, this episode is going to hit home in the most healing way. And actually, I've noticed something lately, because as spring's rolled in, I've been getting more inquiries than usual. And it's that collective fresh start energy that just must be rippling through, because coaches and healers feel that nudge to realign, to put their true message out there. In a way, it's like to stop dancing around your magic and actually say what you're here to say with that clarity and confidence that comes from that soul level belief. Because when your message clicks into place, we know that everything shifts. Those clients that land in your inbox aren't just any clients, but the right ones. The ones that are lit up by your work and respect your process. They're the ones who are ready to invest at the level that your brilliance deserves. So if you feel like this is a season for next level clarity, if you want your message to feel like that true reflection of who you are, and magnetize high frequency, self-led clients. Let's chat about whether we're a good fit to work together. Pop over onto Instagram and DM me on @IamJo.Ingram, or just book a free messaging clarity call on the link inside the show notes, where we can take a look at what's working for you, what's not, what might need to shift energetically and strategically so you can start attracting the clients who feel amazing to work with. Okay, let's get into it. Here is my soul-stirring, pattern-breaking conversation with Michaela Pay. Let's dive in. Michaela, welcome to Goals with Soul.
Well, thank you for having me. I am very excited to be here.
And I'm so excited to have you because I heard you talking in a networking group, and literally within minutes, I was like, you've got to come on to Goals with Soul. You're everything that this podcast stands for. Before we launch into so many questions I want to ask you about specifically the drama triangle, because I have a feeling I need to hear this today. and I trust that if I need to hear it, then people who are tuning into my energy and my podcast need to hear this too. But before we kind of dive into that, give us a little rundown of kind of how you got to being the success psychic and what that's all about.
Okay, so real long story short, I had a spiritual awakening, I think we can call it. I never realized that I could channel spirit. I didn't know that that was really a thing. When I was in my kind of early 20s, mid 20s, I used to dabble a bit with tarot cards, as most people do. And I could give messages across just by looking at those tarot cards, and those messages would be accurate. And I thought it was fluke. I'm going to be really honest. I'm the most cynical person when it comes to spirit, which is crazy given my, what I do for a living now. But I just thought people would naturally put their own spin on whatever it was I was saying to make it fit. So I didn't really believe that I was doing anything special. I thought I was just, saying whatever came into my mind, which obviously I was doing, but I thought that was, coming from a place of me, so a place of ego as opposed to from spirit. And then I had my children and I kind of put it all away and put it to one side. You know my life story. I was married and I was divorced and then I remarried. And when I remarried, we moved down to Cornwall. And it was beautiful. We have a lovely house and we can see the sea. And the whole point was that I would take a step back. So I was a personal trainer. I was kind of doing that tarot thing just, as a bit of fun. So I was a personal trainer for over 10 years. And when we moved to Cornwall, we decided that I wouldn't do that anymore. I would do all my online, I'd move everything online. So I didn't have to be out of the house quite so much. So we could spend more time as a family. We had 2 relatively young children at the time. So, that was the plan. And I remember I was driving home from taking my children to school. I was coming along the coast road and I was, merrily first thing in the morning, music on, listening to whoever it was chatting on the breakfast show. And I heard a voice in the back of my car. Now, I was quite obviously the only person in the car, but it freaked me out so much that I pulled the car over. I was looking in the back of the car, like I must look like a mad woman, honestly. And I was like, I'm sure I heard a voice. Like, I'm absolutely sure I heard it. Yeah, I must be like, and I just put it down to I must have been, too stressed or too tired, so got back in the car and drove home. Came into the kitchen and I was planning on going live in my group. So my personal training stuff, I'd moved online, as I said. So I had an online group and I was due to be going live in there at some point in that morning. So I walked into my kitchen, flicked the kettle on, and it was all quiet. You know how you walk into a really lovely house once you've just dropped the kids off and you take that little breath, don't you? And all of a sudden I just heard now. And I was like, what? And it was genuinely like there was someone stood in front of me shouting in my face, but evidently there was nobody there. And I was like, what? Like, thought I was going mad, but somehow knew that I was meant to be going live. And I just heard, go live now. So I went to my laptop, which was sat on the kitchen table. I didn't have this office at that time. It was in the kitchen table. And I pressed live. And I'd said in that networking group, there is a video of it somewhere, like a recording of it somewhere. I should really find it out. And And it's me looking really dazed, kind of saying, I don't know who needs to hear this, but I have got something to say. And it was just bizarre. I gave over what I can only now describe as a message and came off the live and went and stood at the kettle and was like, oh my Lord, I've just completely ruined my business. Like, I've just blown that up. What on earth was I thinking? Like, that was never anything. I've never spoken about anything spiritual. I'm very practical. And I just thought, I've just, signed my own, dare I say, death warrant. But I was like, I've just completely screwed that group up. So whilst I was doing that live, there were only 2 people on it at the time. There was one woman who even now catches everything that I do. She's a huge supporter of mine, which is, I'm so very lucky to have her. And there was another woman who had only joined the group like really recently, maybe a week or so previous, I think, maybe not even that long. And so they were the only 2 that were on the live, because I wasn't due to be live at that point. And I stood there by the kettle just thinking, I don't know what to go, like where to go from here. How do I go live later and pretend that didn't happen? And with that, my phone pinged. And it was the woman who had recently joined my group. And she was like, oh, I know exactly what that message was. I was like, really? Yeah, I can totally understand everything that you said. I can take all of that message. Thanks so much. I was like, oh, no worries. Like, I genuinely didn't know what to say. I was like, okay, great, thanks. So she went, and I went on with my day a little bit dazed. And I think it was the following day, or maybe 2 days later, she messaged again and said, thank you again. And I was like, it's no worries, like, it's fine. And she said, no, the message you gave, I went to the hospital. So there was a message about it was something to do with her daughter being in hospital. Now, I don't ever remember what I've said when I'm channeling. I think most psychics say that they don't really remember what they're saying. It's just, you give over the message and then it's forgotten. It's not mine anymore. And apparently I'd said something about her daughter being in hospital. So she went to the hospital and told the doctor what I'd said. And the doctor found something that they weren't exactly looking for, but something that was wrong with their daughter. And, her daughter was going to be fine. And I just remember thinking, oh, wow, what is that? And it completely blew my mind, because at no point did I think that that was spirit. At no point did I think that that was me channeling. I honestly thought I was going a little bit crazy. And then everything was quiet for a while. I didn't have those like voices in my head. I didn't get messages. And then all of a sudden, it was like a few months later, it just started again, but this time it was relentless. It was almost like I'd opened the floodgates. And in the middle of the night, I'd be woken up to and it felt like somebody talking in my head by this point. So it was no longer a voice external from me. It had changed somewhat, and it was like in my head now. And so from there, I grew that muscle, if you like, and started giving those messages over, realizing that what I was saying was accurate. And it's kind of transitioned from there. So my business, I'm no longer a personal trainer. I don't do that anymore. My business completely transitioned to being something spiritual, but it did take a very long time. I went the long way through my entrepreneurial journey. I was an empowerment coach for a little while, because I didn't want to admit that, I was channeling spirit. It's, that's a bit of a weird thing to say, isn't it? But yeah, I'm totally, I think I said in the networking meeting that we were in, I am the least spiritual person going. I don't do all of the spiritual things that people say that we should be doing. I just do what feels good in the moment, and it seems to work.
Oh, I really love that. That's such a great story. And I must admit, I have a tinge of envy in this kind of awakening that you've had, because so many of us seek a direct connection with spirit and we want to feel it. We're always looking for signs, the feathers, the numbers, the things. And to be awakened to such a direct connection must be, at this stage at least, very comforting to know that you have that team and those guides, that you have that support from. And it's interesting that you say, about when you're channeling, you don't remember, because it was on my own journey when I first came out of corporate, which was at the beginning of the pandemic. And I launched myself as a kind of an accountability, productivity, CEO strategy coach, because that's what I had at the time in my toolkit, but started to bring more and more of my spiritual growth and my kind of insights into my business with my pranic healing and then breathwork facilitation. And I realized that when I let go of the business coach business and instead focused on what is my zone of genius, which is messaging, which I now know is messaging for spiritual specialists.
Mm-hmm.
When I sit with a client and our energies are attached, I'm channeling the information, which in my case is the articulation of what's on their heart, of what their message is that they have but cannot seem to find the words for. And it comes out of my mouth. And sometimes they'll say, oh, like, can I have that? And I'm like, it's yours. It was never mine. That I would never have come across that had we not been together in the energy. And by the way, don't ask me to repeat it, because I have no idea what those words were. But by the way, the recording, you can just check in on that and take the words verbatim. They're yours. They're not mine. And it was only when I was chatting to a spiritual mentor, a psychic mentor friend of mine, she was like, well, you know that you are channeling. You never attributed it to that. And in fact, I felt some shame that I couldn't repeat it or remember it. And I was like, God, what's wrong with me? I've just spoken this barrage of words and I know they're good because all the hairs on my arms are standing up and I'm feeling really excited and the person I'm talking to is crying or excited and there's this energetic frisson going on, and yet couldn't tell you what I just said. No chance. And it's like
it's a real phenomenon because so many people do that. And I think it's almost, there's a bit of shame attached to the fact that we can't remember. But for me, I'm just like, well, I don't remember it. I hope that you know what I said. And I always encourage people to take notes, or like you say, record those conversations to make sure that, what you're saying can be used.
Now, I'm curious. So you've gone from this place of obviously now embracing your abilities, pivoting your business into using these innate intuitive talents. And obviously your book, the Dismantling the Drama Triangle, is a massive, where the heck did that come from? Right? It's like, you're a personal trainer and now you're the authority on at least interpreting something that is going to make a massive difference to people's lives and businesses, and putting a completely different spin on something that many may have heard of but few are implementing. Where did this insight and knowledge come from?
So I can't claim that the drama triangle is mine and mine alone, because that's not true. The drama triangle, what I write about is my interpretation of it. So the drama triangle is, I think, I don't actually know who came up with it. That's terrible. I probably should know. But it's a concept that has the hero, the victim, and the villain. And what we can say is that at any point, at any situation, any event that happens, you are stepping into the drama triangle quite often, whether you are recognizing it or not. And you can be stepping into it as a victim, as a villain, or as a hero. And they have very unique characteristics and very unique ways of being. And what happens is when you're in that situation, you aren't ever working at your best, ever. You're never coming from a place of complete neutrality. There's always emotion attached to whatever the decision is that you're making or whatever the situation is that you're in. And that means that you aren't coming from your higher self. You can't be, because you have these other characteristics that are playing out. And when you recognize that you are, coming from victim, for instance, what's really interesting is when you start to have that awareness, you can then see where or who is playing the villain or who is playing the hero. So there is an example I give in the book, actually, a recent example. I was at CrossFit and I couldn't jump the rope. I couldn't climb the rope. And I was getting really frustrated, like really frustrated. And so we've been put into teams. And I was with this really quite athletic chap. I think there was someone else in our team as well. And he was like, well, I'll get it for you. Like, let me get the rope down. I'll help you. I'll get the box. Let me get you that. And because I was in the midst of writing the book as well, straight away I was like, oh, drama triangle, I can see it. And straight away I was putting myself into victim because I couldn't do it. I was, woe is me, damsel in distress. I can't do the rope. Which meant that I was putting my coach into villain, because how dare he ask me to do something that I'm incapable of doing, and was really kind of getting quite frustrated with him. But the other person in my team was coming in, swooping in to be the hero, to fix things for me. Now, that is not empowering, not for me or anyone else. And so I quickly recognized that this is a drama triangle playing out. This isn't going to be beneficial to my growth. And so quite politely said, no, that's fine. Thanks so much. I'm going to persevere. I'm going to keep going. And remove myself from that triangle, because once you see it, have that awareness, you can then remove yourself from that situation. I stopped being quite so frustrated because I could see that I was just winding myself up, getting myself in the emotion of the triangle. And instead of empowering myself and saying, right, how can I achieve XYZ, in this case, climbing the rope? Instead of saying that, I was, focusing my anger, if you like, onto my coach, or I was focusing my desperation onto my hero. And I didn't need to do that, because actually I had it all inside of me. And no, I didn't reach the top of the rope, not the very top anyway, but I did climb it. And it was, the feeling of euphoria, actually, of being able to do that for myself. That is empowerment. It's not about, and it's like, you can think about it in various terms as well, because we think we're empowering ourselves when we go and help other people. Actually, being the hero is really toxic, because you're taking away the opportunity for somebody else to empower themselves. You are trying to fix those things. And although sometimes you think it will come from a place of, I'm trying to help and I'm trying to be kind and I'm trying to, gift somebody something, you're kind of actually disempowering them. You're taking that away. You're not giving them the opportunity to be all that they can be. There's also, like, it is multifaceted also. When you come in as a hero, there's an element of wanting to be liked. We're doing it because we want other people to like us. It's not always that we're doing it for the benefit of the other person. You're doing it for your benefit. And that's true of every action, actually. I mean, we know this to be true, that every action has to have a benefit to ourselves. We never do anything unless there is a benefit to us, ever. So going in as the hero is not about anything to do with that person and trying to help them, really. It's about how we look. It's about what we achieve. It's about how it looks on us. So totally disempowering to the person that you're intending to help. Also disempowering to yourself as a hero, but also disempowering to yourself, because you are worrying about what other people are thinking about you. You're not concerned with how you are and what you think about yourself. So it's a really multifaceted, quite complex concept to understand sometimes. And I hope that in my book I've broken it down enough. I mean, it's a small but mighty book is what I call it. It's, it's not very long. It is kind of the bare bones of what is a drama triangle and how to recognize it, and all the characteristics that are set out for each of those characters, and how you can then change the behaviors that you would notice in those characters, how you can change the behaviors to become a more empowered version of yourself.
That makes so much sense. It's like when you break it down into those three components, I think it's really easy to start seeing where we sit at any one time in any particular relationship. And particularly, this is close to my heart as well. My work with many of my clients, we dive into the energetics of business, which incorporates boundaries. And the way that we show up in our business is, of course, the overriding energy that will determine the type of clients that we attract. And I'm all about attracting perfect fit clients. And when I say perfect fit, I mean perfect fit for you, the people that you are supposed to be working with. And one of the things that I see so often, and this is something that I experienced like really majorly, is this idea of over-efforting and over-delivering. And this is the rescuer energy that you describe. This is this idea that my client can't do it, so I will help them, I will do it for them.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what I was doing at the beginning of my business. I mentioned I was productivity and accountability, and I was all about messaging around this idea that if you can't hit a deadline, if you can't, there's too much work and too little week and you need support. And I was getting clients. The problem is that we weren't a great fit, because what was happening is they were showing up with I can't energy, and I was meeting that with, well, I'll do it for you energy, over-proving. I so desperately wanted them to be successful and to get the outcomes. And in the most part, they did, because I was doing it for them. But I quickly saw that as soon as our container finished and they went back to working on their own, they kind of, all that momentum dropped away. And I describe it as borrowed energy. It's like they borrowed my energy for that time, and that wasn't the solution that they really needed. It was disempowering. And I see that so often now repeated in others. And they say, well, why is it that I can't attract the clients that I really want? The empowered clients, the ones that are full of self-trust, the hell yes clients. And it was like, well, how are you showing up with the clients that you currently have? Because if that's the energy that you are expressing in your business, then you will simply attract more of that energy, which of course we then overlay with appropriate wording and messaging. But fundamentally, if your energy is off, any pretty words aren't going to bridge the gap for you. And you're going to wonder, why is it I borrowed a swipe file that this successful person's used to attract all these empowered 5-figure clients, and yet I'm struggling? And it all boils down to that. So tell us a bit more about it in a business context as well. It's because I know you work with entrepreneurs, coaches, healers.
Yeah, predominantly, it is female entrepreneurs that I work with. And what you've just said is kind of hits the nail on the head. This is what I see in my clients over and over again. And the book is full of these different stories of my clients and the things that I have witnessed and the things that I've helped them with. But yeah, like this over giving, over delivering energy is absolutely the hero energy, and you're taking away from your clients. And what that means is if you're not believing in those people, ultimately you're not believing in yourself. And it's right what you're saying about the energetics of it. When you're writing these long posts about how fantastic your work is, if you're more worried about the results that your clients are going to get, as opposed to the fact that and how you've helped them do that, as opposed to how they are achieving those things. Because if it's almost like you are expecting them to fail without you, and they're not the clients that you want, firstly, because they're not gonna succeed once you've left, which is what you've noticed you were noticing in your business. Once those people had gone on their merry way, you know, they were no longer productive, they were no longer hitting those deadlines. And so yeah, we see a lot of that, and that is the drama triangle, you know, playing out, absolutely. But also, and we haven't touched on this yet, is about us as coaches, as mentors, as, you know, we become the villain quite often, because when we're helping those people, that they come into our business and we are you know, we're giving them all the answers, we are telling them the way, we are, you know, giving them those swipe files to go and achieve those things that we've achieved, and then they think we're the hero, we feel like the hero, and they're victims. Like, surely that's not right, surely that's not what we want for our clients. We don't want them to be victims. But when they then go off and don't achieve the things with you there, that triangle kind of shifts somewhat. So they are still victim, but no longer are you the hero, you become the villain. And they're looking for somebody else. And this is why you see people go from coach to coach to coach to coach to coach, because they are constantly putting their old coach into villain, and the, you know, the new coach, the person who's going to fix it all, the next shiny thing, if you like, into hero.
So if you're the coach who's been put into villain, how do you step out that triangle if you're being positioned as that by someone who perceives themselves as a victim?
So firstly, if somebody puts you into a triangle, you have the absolute ability to just step out of it. If someone's trying to pull you into a triangle, you just have to be aware that that's what they're doing, that's what's happening, and recognize why they're doing it. Why are they putting you in villain? And this is the really uncomfortable bit sometimes, because you might have to look at yourself and go, maybe I do come in with that hero energy. Maybe I am not helping my clients. Maybe I'm actually disempowering them. And that is a really uncomfortable place to be. I've been there. Like, I definitely went in, especially so as a personal trainer, absolutely. Yeah, I can help you. Yeah, we can do this. And when they leave, they're not doing the thing, because I'm not empowering them to find the answers for themselves. I'm not empowering them to go and exercise for themselves, for instance. They only ever did it when they were with me, because I was encouraging them. I was the one that was, you know, energetic all the time, and wiped out come 8 o'clock at night, because, you know, I'd been on all day for my clients.
So can I just get some clarity here?
Yeah,
what I'm hearing is that we can often end up in villain because we put ourselves as rescuer.
Yeah,
that's so it's not like, oh, we weren't in a triangle and then I became villain. It's, in your experience, usually it's because we've showed up as rescuer that the natural next step, if they don't succeed, which is very likely because we've been rescuer to their victim, that then we will turn in, they will then position us as villain. It's almost like twist the dial on the triangle. So the best way of avoiding becoming the villain is not to become the rescuer in the first place.
Absolutely, because you want to empower people. You don't want to come in and be their savior. Like, how is that helping anybody, really? I know it feels good, and it comes back to that we only ever do things that are of a benefit to ourselves. It feels good to help other people because of how it looks to other people. You know, if we're coming in, and especially in business, if we're coming in and going, oh yeah, all of my clients are, you know, hitting 5 figures or this or that, or, you know, they're all getting these goals. It feels good when people then start to acknowledge that, doesn't it? It feels good when people start to then praise us. And there's going to be a whole host of things that, you know, we can go back and back and back to look at why we want that praise, and, you know, where that stems from. But ultimately, awareness is always going to be key, first and foremost. If we recognize that the most important thing we can do for our clients is to empower them, it's not to always give them the answers, it's to let them find them for themselves. We don't go to our children, do we, and tell them everything all of the time. We encourage them to explore. We encourage them to make mistakes. No child just stands up and walks. They fall over lots. We don't just go, oh, well, you don't do it, and this is what, you know, we don't explain to those children in very, you know, step-by-step terms. We just encourage them to keep having a go, keep doing it. And this is what I feel we need to do with our clients. We need to encourage them. It's okay to make mistakes. And the fact that we don't celebrate those mistakes as entrepreneurs, do we? We actually hide from them because we don't want people to think we're failures. We don't want people to think that we haven't succeeded or achieved the things that we've said we're going to achieve. And I think that sometimes it's okay to say I got it wrong, or that didn't work, or show the shadow or the flawed sides of ourselves. I think it's really important to be that rounded human. It comes back to the spiritual things that I talk about, is that we are here to have human experiences. We are here to make mistakes. We are here to trip up. We are here to fall, because that's how we become rounded human beings. It's how we become more. It's how we grow. It's how we evolve. It's how we achieve.
Now, what about the coach as victim? Do we ever set ourselves up or get put in a triangle where we're actually the victim?
Absolutely. When our clients then become the villains, and they haven't paid, for instance, that's always, that's the first one. If somebody kind of is on a payment plan and doesn't make that payment, straight away they become the villain, don't they? They've not paid. This is terrible. And you see it quite often. And so you'll have these posts on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, about, how dare they not? And they become this awful person that's kind of pushed them back. And yeah, we can absolutely be victims as coaches. It's interesting to then work out where the hero lies in that scenario there, isn't it? Because sometimes it can be the person that is validating your rant on Facebook, for instance. It can be those people, they become the hero, if you like. Again, really not empowering you, because you're not doing the things that a CEO or an entrepreneur would be doing and putting in place to make sure that mispayment, for instance, wasn't going to happen. So not empowering. It's, as I say, multifaceted, because as soon as we become victim, there's always got to be a villain. There's always got to be a hero. And it's just recognizing that that's what's happening, and then taking that step back to breathe and make a decision from an empowered place and from your higher self.
Michaela, that is so insightful. And I know that I'm certainly thinking through all these scenarios where that is so apt. And I can't imagine anybody doesn't think, yeah, that's something that's really tangible in my business. I can see where I could apply that in a lot of different ways. And it's true to say that, we don't stand still at one of those triangle points. We're like continually moving through them. And like you said, the key is to step out of the triangle, not to just shift it around. And I'm like, one thing that just blew my mind when I met you recently was that you kind of only stepped back into your business with full force quite recently. And I know that you've been through quite a lot of stuff over the last couple of years. And I was wondering, are you like okay to talk about some of that, particularly in the frame of how we get back to really bringing our full selves, as you clearly are, to others and in our business, and serving in a really, higher self way when we have things outside of our business in our lives that, well, quite frankly, we wouldn't wish on anyone, and yet we have to come back from.
Yeah. What's the alternative? Like, that's always my go-to. Like, what's the alternative here? Do I sit and wallow and, ultimately make myself a victim for the rest of forever? And for those of, your listeners might not know, but I was widowed 2 years ago. I'm a young widow. I don't feel particularly young now, but I would be classed as a young widow. I was 38 when my husband passed away. And yeah, I could quite easily sit in that and not do anything and let my business go to rack and ruin. And I could quite easily sit in that triangle and wallow and be a victim forever. But what is that showing my children? What is that showing of me? Because I know I'm here for a bigger purpose. And it doesn't mean that in those first moments of that happening, in those first weeks or months, or even the first year, I would say, I was in nowhere near a place where I could be positive or productive or really a particularly great coach. And I did coach, absolutely. I still have my clients. I think I said to you just before we came on, I had 6 weeks off of my coaching business and then went straight back into coaching. And it was a very, my husband died in a very traumatic way, but coaching was all I knew. And my go-to has always been, what's the alternative? But also, it's never going to be that bad. Do you know when people say, oh, I can't cope with this? I think, well, what else are you going to do? You've kind of got to, haven't you? There's no out. There is no out. You've just got to keep going forwards. And as awful as it might be, and every day might be an absolute minefield of emotion to navigate, you still have to go through it. Like, that day is going to happen regardless. So is it going to be that I'm going to sit there and be a victim that day? And some days, yes, it was. Like, absolutely, I will put my hands up. Yeah, some days. And even now, some days I have a complete victim mentality until I remember, actually, I don't have to be here. Like, I don't have to be in this triangle. I don't have to be in this emotion right in this moment. And that's not to say that we don't sit in the emotion and feel it and let it process, but it's about being aware that it doesn't have to be all of you. It doesn't have to take up everything all of the time. You can be happy. You can choose to be happy. You can choose to step out of that triangle. You always have a choice. And that triangle has been ever present for all of us, I suspect, throughout all of our lives. We've all had different things to contend with. But it's that realization that I have control, actually, of these things that are going on. I don't have control of the situations, but I have control of how I react to it. I have control of how I respond to it. And that's the most important thing for me. And that is why, it's been nearly 2.5 years, since my husband passed. And it's only now that I feel strong enough to start talking about that in a way that is positive. I know that, as traumatic as it was, my husband's life and his mission here on earth was complete. It doesn't mean that it hurts any less, doesn't mean that it's any less painful, but if I really truly believe in spirit, and if I really truly believe in the work that I do, I have to believe that too. I have to believe it works for me as well. I'm not exempt from it. Just because I talk about it, it doesn't mean that I'm exempt from it. And, it's a bit like the triangle, right? So I've written about it. I know about the triangle inside out. Of course, I believe I'm probably one of the authorities on the drama triangle. But does that mean that the drama triangle never happens to me? No, of course not. I'm still sat in it sometimes, especially, yes, in my business, yes, in my relationships, yes, when my daughter won't do as she's told, and, I become the victim because she's mouthing back because she's 17 and wants to go and drive a car, and I'm telling her she's got to be in at a certain time. Of course, those triangles happen all day, every day, in every relationship, in every situation we're in. And you're never exempt from it. Just because you know about it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen to you. It just means that you have more awareness so that you can do something about it a little quicker. And this is what I want everyone to be able to do. I want everyone to be able to have that awareness so that they can remove themselves from these triangles and make decisions from really empowered places, make decisions about their lives and businesses that mean that they have that impact that they are here to have. That means that they are here to, the things that they are here to achieve, they then go on to achieve. And that's my mission.
And that's a fantastic mission. And if anybody wanted to take one small step today, a piece of inspired action that is going to give them a bit of insight and perhaps some improvement in an aspect of their life through this idea of the drama triangle, what would you recommend?
Sit in the uncomfortableness is the first thing, because it is really friggin' uncomfortable sometimes. pick a situation that's happening for you, pick that thing that's really uncomfortable, and work out where you are in that triangle. Work out, if you are the victim, who is trying to save you? Who is who are you putting as the villain? Who is it that's hurting you? I mean, I'd say the worst, but the hardest one to sit in is when you are being the hero, because then you have to really take a long, hard look at why you're doing what you're doing and who it is that you're trying to please. Because that's generally why we're putting ourselves into heroes, because we're trying to please somebody. When you've taken that time to recognize that triangle and where you are in it, you can then take steps to remove yourself from it. And those steps are really simple, because awareness is key. If you're a hero, how can you not be that hero? How can you empower that person that you are trying to save? How can you do that in a different way? Why does it? And then there are questions like, why does it matter what other people think about you? You can go really deep in those things. I have all those questions, and there's lots of activity work to do in the book, actually. But that would be my first step, would be take the time to be really uncomfortable, because it's not a pleasant place to sit when you're being really introvert and looking inside yourself at where do I need to grow.
That's fantastic. And actually that story about your daughter has made me think about, my own circumstances. And only yesterday I was having a conversation about the drama triangle, though we didn't call it that, but now I'm giving that title. And in fact, it was almost like meant to be that we were having this conversation today, because last night, literally, I was with a spiritual coach that is mentoring me, and we were talking about how I keep showing up as victim in a particular problem that me and my daughter are having in our relationship. And she's like, you need to be aware of your placing yourself as victim, and you need to step out of that. And I'm like, yeah, but how do I step out of that? And literally it was as simple as turning the feeling neutral, allowing the adrenaline to pass through, and have a neutral thought. That's going to sound crazy, but neutral thought is, I don't like that very much, was the one I came up with. Not like you're this or you're that or this is that. It was like, I don't like this very much, or I don't like what you're speaking about or your behavior. Not necessarily to be spoken out loud, but even just an internal voice. And got to be honest with you, Michaela, I'm trying, but that, like you said, awareness is the first thing, right? And luckily for me, my Zen master daughter gives me lots of opportunities to practice stepping out of the various states of the drama triangle. So I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, it's so difficult, isn't it? Especially when it's with people that we love, whether it's children or partners or parents. Recognizing where that is happening, because sometimes you're just really frustrated. But yeah, the neutrality part is key. And there's lots, like I talk about this in the book, there are lots of different scenarios that you can go through. So I talk about the drama triangle in relation to procrastination, so how we stop doing things in our business, for instance, but also about how it affects our self-confidence, how it affects people pleasing. But I also talk about it in terms of worst case scenario. So this is a real, that's another concept that I talk about, the drama triangle and worst case scenario, and how those two things. So I use this with my daughter all the time. What is worst case scenario? Where are we going in this triangle? What is worst case, and do I want to go there? And when you get really neutral with your worst case scenario, like this is just a little snippet, but when you get neutral with worst case scenario, everything else seems easy. That's that is a bit of a mind bender. I do talk about that in the book quite a lot, because that is one of the, alongside the drama triangle, worst case scenario is one of the biggest but most powerful pieces of work I've ever done.
And if people want to learn a little bit more about what you do, read your awesome book, where's the best place to find you?
So you can find the book on Amazon under my name, Michaela Pay. You can find me on Facebook and on Instagram and on TikTok, all under the Michaela Pay. And yeah, you can email me as well.
And we will put all those links in the show notes as always. So you can just click on there and say hi to Michaela. Just to say, Michaela, thank you so much. It's been an absolutely riveting conversation today. I'm so glad you joined us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been great.
And my thanks again to Michaela for joining us today. You can find all the links in the show notes as usual. And if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure you hit subscribe on your favourite podcast platform so you don't miss the next one. And if you feel called, leave a quick review. It would mean the world. Because every time someone leaves a review, it helps other soulful coaches, healers, entrepreneurs discover this podcast. And that is how the ripple effect begins. So thank you for tuning in, for being part of the Goals with Soul community, and of course for doing the powerful transformational work that you're here to do. Here's to taking inspired action. I'll see you next time on Goals with Soul. Take care. Bye now.